Welcome back to Session 0, where I discuss Dungeon World every week. Today I'm concluding my Dungeon World Basic Move series with Aid or Interfere and Defy Danger. This video would have been much longer than my previous ones because I have a lot to say about Defy Danger. I typically insert my Anatomy of a Player Move segment here, but I've decided not to because of its 3-minute runtime. If you want to see that segment, it's at the 15 or 16 second mark in each of the first videos in this series. You can use this card to jump to that playlist, which I've also linked in the description. I'll start with Aid or Interfere, which can be both helpful and a lot of fun. When you help or hinder someone you have a bond with, roll plus bond with them. On a hit, which is anything 7 or higher, they take +1, which is helping, or -2, which is hindering, your choice. On a 7 to 9, you also expose yourself to danger, retribution, or cost. A 6- really depends on the original situation and how a character aids or interferes. The GM move, which should follow the fiction, should be made against the character attempting to aid or interfere, not the player who made the original move. That may not always be the case, but it's a good rule of thumb. The player should say how they help or hinder. If they don't, make sure you ask. Most of the time, players will trigger this move to aid a party member to turn a 6 into a 7 or a 9 into a 10, but you could do so even if they rolled a 5 or an 8. Why would you aid when doing so wouldn't push them over the threshold? Because it's fun. It adds to the fiction whether you get a hit or a miss. Now let's look at the flip side of that, interfere, which is actually a pretty complex decision. For one thing, it's adversarial. You have to be on the same page with your group if you're going to hinder them. For another, there are 4 different cases to consider when hindering. Let's first start with the case in which neither aiding nor interfering matters, 12 or more and 5 or less. With either roll, neither a +1 nor a -2 will change the outcome, so one could hinder purely for the sake of fiction. It would matter if there's a 12+ move in play, but those are rare. Now let's look at the threshold case, 9 and 6. With either roll, hindering doesn't change the result, but a successful help will push up to a 10 or a 7 respectively. I think we would all try to help that 6 up to a 7, but I might be inclined to hinder a 9 down to a 7 rather than helping it up to a 10 if, and this is a big if, the hinder added some really good fiction and the other player loves the 7 to 9 range as much as I do. The best way for you to know is just to ask. Do you want to try for that 10+, or is the mid-range okay? Because I have a fun way to interfere and it won't knock you down to a fail. Now let's look at the case where aiding doesn't matter, but interfering pushes the result down to a lower range. These are the 10 or 11 and 7 or 8. Although again, if there's a 12+ move involved, the 11 would matter. With either result, +1 won't change the result, but -2 will cause a worse result. This looks similar to, but is very different than the previous case. The other player has earned their success, so don't take it away from them. Don't take it away unless they ask you to. And that actually brings us to the final case, but I've never heard or seen this happen. It's when a player asks you to hinder their roll down to a failure. When you're coming to the end of a session, a player rolls a 7 or 8 and says, if I can get 1 more XP, the end of session XP will give me enough to level up next session. Does someone want to hinder me so I fail? I've never seen it, but it could happen. Alright, I'll finish up this series with Defy Danger. When you act despite an imminent threat or suffer a calamity, say how you deal with it and roll. If you do it by powering through, plus STR. By getting out of the way or acting fast, plus Dex. By enduring, plus Con. With quick thinking, plus Int. Through mental fortitude, plus Wiz. Using charm and social grace, plus Cha. On a 10+, you do what you set out to do. The threat doesn't come to bear. On a 7 to 9, you stumble, hesitate, or flinch. The GM will offer you a worse outcome, hard bargain, or an ugly choice. A 6- result here is easy. The threat does come to bear. Now, back in the Google Plus days, there was a long thread about not chaining Defy Danger rolls back to back. But this move triggers when you act despite an imminent threat or suffer a calamity. Since a worse outcome, the hardest part of the bargain, or the ugliest choice could be Calamity, it can cause Defy Danger to trigger again. There's a lot of back and forth between the player and GM with this move. Remember, Powered by the Apocalypse games are a conversation. Also, the authors state that it's a catch-all move that can be used when a roll is clearly necessary, but no other move applies. As written, I don't think it is. In fact, it's pretty specific. But at this timestamp, I'll show you a couple easy modifications I've made to the move. The threat needs to have already been established. This falls squarely on the GM as they're describing the situation. The river is frozen over, but the creaking ice makes you think it may not be as thick in some places as others. A large tree laying across the river could act as a bridge, but it too is covered in ice and snow. What do? There are a lot of situations when you can ask for a Defy Danger roll. Using the environment is a common way, but the terrifying tag is one as well. A character could freeze up and do nothing, or even just run away against a terrifying foe. Debilities can trigger it too. They give a mechanical -1 penalty to a specific modifier, but they're also fictional. Weak, shaky, sick, stunned, and confused can all cause a Defy Danger roll. With the right fiction, Scarred can as well. Defy Danger looks catch-all, but I don't think it really is. Again, Powered by the Apocalypse games are a conversation, so my modifications probably aren't even necessary. Feel free to ignore this entire segment if you want to. Well, let's look at the trigger block. The trigger is when you act despite an imminent threat or suffer a calamity. The word imminent suggests that the danger is already part of the narrative, which is fine, but not catch-all. Sometimes the GM won't know how to describe a threat because they don't know what their players are going to do. An example of this is when a bard wants to perform in a tavern to earn some coin, but the GM didn't think to mention that the crowd here is mean to performers when they get it wrong. A simple fix here is to add the words "or potential" when you act despite an imminent or potential threat or suffer a calamity. This lets the GM say, that would be Defy Danger because I didn't think to mention that the crowd gets pretty unruly towards performers here when they do poorly. Do you want to continue with that? My call for roll is also more verbose, but I think it helps to Defy Danger to make it more catch-all. Say how you deal with it, which will determine your modifier, and roll. Examples of how include, but are not limited to, the first edition is necessary because of the second one. The second edition makes the choices only examples rather than an exhaustive list, so I don't need to alter them in any way. I also won't alter the result range because it's perfect. Again, you don't have to use this, but it's how I present Defy Danger to my players. Another option for Defy Danger is the role used in World of Dungeons. World of Dungeons was a Dungeon World Kickstarter reward written by John Harper as a what if. What if World of Dungeons was the RPG created back in the day, and it evolved into Dungeon World. This move covers all of the dice rolls in World of Dungeons, so it's definitely a catch-all and is, in my opinion at least, a better version of Defy Danger. World of Dungeons is Dungeon World simplified way down, and I love this simplicity. It gives you 4 classes to choose from, which is fine, and the magic system is very different. It's not fancy in magic, and I really appreciate that. I love World of Dungeons, but it provides less to talk about than Dungeon World does. If you're interested in me covering it though, let me know in the comments below. I've included a link to World of Dungeons, which is free, in the description. So those were the final 2 of the 8 basic moves in Dungeon World. The 8 basic moves definitely cover combat and touch on social interaction, but don't really cover exploration. That pillar of play is included in the special moves though. Well, let me know what I missed in the comments below. If you enjoy this content, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I hope you come back next week when I change gears a little bit. I've gotten some good responses to the Batman polls on my community tab. I want to take a look at some options for playing a Batman-like character in Vanilla Dungeon World. Have a great day!